Hello everyone, this is the second video of Chapter 10, lecture about taboo recreation. It's probably one of the exciting and really, interesting, really fascinating topic of all in a way. Anyway, so in this second part of the lecture, we're going to talk about various examples and categories of taboo recreation to see, really, each category can be very uncommon, but together, they're everywhere. Taboo recreation, deviant leisure is everywhere in our society, in our life. For example, I wanted to begin with something in a little box, right? In our chapter, it's with a little picture, usually with the questions. Box 10.2 begin this section with a very, very interesting case of what is called a dark tourism. How it's defined in the literature is the act of travel to sites associated with the death. And sometimes it's a massacre. It's a lot of people, a lot of death, suffering, or the seemingly something really disturbing, right? And there are different types of dark tourism in it, different types of attraction. But one of the most common one, distinct one, is what is called a disaster tourism. Doing tourism to the site which was hit by major disaster. It could be natural disaster, or it could be human-made, like, for example, nuclear crisis in Chernobyl in Russia. Now, the example that I wanted to talk about here is the bus tour, infamous, very famous and infamous bus tours in a city called New Orleans, actually, which we talked about in the case of Mardi Gras in the last video. After a major hurricanes, actually, two. One is called Katrina, the other one was Rita, I think, in 2005. So it's a while ago, which probably you don't know. But it was a major hurricane. The flood, there was actually levee, the canal and the levee that broke, and a lot of water went into, especially impoverished neighborhoods, and killed a lot of people, thousands of people. Now, there has been a bus tour where people go in and take a look at the community that was devastated, destroyed by the flood and hurricane. And you can still see actually an empty house with the flood damage. And they're on the floor, on their wall, there's a spray signature, which basically communicates that, how many people did anybody, those emergency people find any bodies, things like that. So people go there to take a look at those damage. And obviously, this is a very ethically controversial, as you can see on the right side picture here. Now, it's been a fascinating topic because we want to understand why. Why do we want to do this disaster tourism? And some researchers have studied the motivation behind it. And for example, one of the leading researchers is this person called Byron. And he studied Chinese people who traveled to our province called Sichuan, trying to pronounce in a Mandarin way. I'm pretty sure that is not correct. But this province with the food, because they're famous for the spicy food, Sichuan flavor. It's everywhere in this town as well. In Canada, really. People know this province. It's famous for very beautiful nature. But in 2008, and actually later on too, it's an earthquake-prone area. So there was earthquake. A lot of people died because building collapsed very, very badly, especially in 2008. So around early 2010s, this researcher get a sample of the Chinese people from the Beijing area, the capital city, right? And if they want to, for those of you, people who wanted to travel to Sichuan, and if they want to travel to Sichuan, what was their motivation? That's what they asked for. And out of 300 people or so, about 12.3%, more than 1 out of 10, they were strongly motivated for the dark tourism, for disaster tourism purposes. And what they meant by dark tourism here is to look at the damage of the disaster, look at the recovery of the disaster, and sometimes giving a remembrance, thinking about the fate and how fragile our life could be. Now, I've done actually some research around disasters in my earlier career, and I actually talked with some Hurricane Katrina survivors from New Orleans. I did interviews with the people in the field work actually in Fukushima, that's northern eastern part of Japan, where the earthquake and tsunami and nuclear crisis happened in 2011, right? And this really happens. So really, a fair amount of people wants to do this disaster tourism, dark tourism. And sometimes it's about seeing the damage because sometimes they're not there when that happens, right? Or sometimes they're just looking at their damage through the media. They want to understand it from their own perspective, through their eyes. And they want to see how, those damaged area, destroyed area, recovered since then. Sometimes it's physically, right, buildings and everything. Sometimes it's more socially, as a group of people, the society, the community came back. And this is not so uncommon again, because if you think about it, 9/11 in New York City, Twin Towers, right? Right now, there is actually a new building, Ground Zero, that area. And there are, monuments there too. A lot of people, if you visit New York City, would actually visit there as part of their tourism sightseeing too. So definitely it's ethically problematic in a certain way, like the Hurricane Katrina as example. I mean, there are still people who are suffering from the long-term effect of the hurricane and the later hurricanes in that area. And the people with the money and the resources to go in and look at the people is arguably very problematic. However, this seems to actually, the motivation seems to help people to understand this type of crisis and understand recovery. And potentially it could lead to greater awareness of the issues and, more donation to this cause of disaster relief, for example, and maybe sometimes, policy changes and electing people, officials who care about these issues as well. So there could be some positive aspect to this disaster tourism, dark tourism as well. Now, a major category of the example of taboo recreation the chapter talked about is this vandalism. It's about damaging or defacing, defacing private or public property. It could be many things, right? It could be graffiti, it could be littering, it could be, throwing something into the glass wall of the, shop on the street. It could be, damaging traffic signage, for example. It's very common. And if you walk out of your place property, or if you walk on there's a major street in Edmonton, if you haven't been to the city yet because of the COVID, White Avenue, right? And if you go back and forth a couple of times, you will see some example of vandalism for sure. It's common, and it looks a little bit trivial, each case maybe, but together it's very expensive to address. It costs, according to the old statistics, $15 billion a year in the United States. And I'm pretty sure it's way more expensive right now with everything else going on. Sometimes there's a social protest, some of them are peaceful, but that turned into sometimes riots, and there's a violence too, and vandalism too, right? So it could boost up some of the costs as well. Now, the chapter talks about different types, different categories of vandalism. And what I want you to really understand is that vandalism is not necessarily ill intention. People have bad intention, bad purpose to damage, and which is actually the fourth category from the top. It's called a malicious vandalism. Even so, there's actually something potentially justifiable here, but I'm going to talk about. There are different reasons and intentions. And if you're in a position, maybe you work for parks and recreation, you will see vandalism everywhere. This is the major headache. To address it, you really have to understand that there are different reasons and intentions, okay? Not just that people are bad, ill intention. From the top of the list, the chapter talked about slovenly vandalism, which means basically bad manners, carelessness, like littering. You know, in a national park, outdoor setting, you should pick up the garbage and bring it home. People know it, or maybe not know it, or just like they're careless, just leave the garbage out there. The other type is no other way to do it. Of course, that's how the chapter kind of make it, you know, the made up name. However, what it means here is that lack of facility, limited design, limited facility. For example, sitting on a fence or sitting on something that you should be sitting on, you shouldn't be sitting on when there's no bench or seating place, right? It happens. Conflict between design and logical behavior. For example, if you've been to U of A campus, there's something called a quad, right? It's a big spacious area with the grass wall. It's beautiful, it's nice. And there's like pathway, concrete pavement, crisscrossing. It doesn't necessarily go from the one side to the other side straight though. It's kind of crisscrossing like this. You see, zigzagging, right? So you kind of have to kind of zigzag if you want to stay on the pavement, which is the intention of the designer probably. But you may just go walk, make a shortcut, and just go straight and step on the lawn, which is okay in North America, by the way. So it's not that deviant, sorry. But in some Asian country like China or Japan, you are strongly not discouraged from stepping on a grass and lawn. So it's very actually deviant behavior to do. You would realize that actually you will see a sign that don't step on the lawn and the grass in campus and their parks and everything in those other countries. You'll be surprised. But that's one of those examples. You know, it's actually logical behavior because you want to get from the point A to the B in the shortest amount of time. The fourth category is malicious, which means some people feel mistreated by society and want to get back at society, like revenge, right? For example, there is a traffic sign, stop sign, you didn't quite stop there, and the police just happened to be there and you got ticketed, right? Now, you may feel mistreated because you feel like you almost stopped there. Or, I don't know, the sign was kind of hidden by the tree and you couldn't really see it. So you feel like not quite justice there, and you want to get back to it by maybe destroying that signage, which is not good. Of course, it's a vandalism. However, that kind of revenge can be your motivation here. Cyber vandalism is basically vandalism on the internet website, right? Usually it's defacing a website, putting some, changing the image of the websites, basically swapping the picture, putting a signature, leaving a signature of the people who hacked, basically, right? Second and last one is called thrill vandalism, seeking excitement, giving a dare and daring to others, friends, and or getting daring from friends and do it, like damaging a statue, for example. And last one is self-expression. There's some attempts to be noticed, such as graffiti. Graffiti typically has signature, or the graffiti itself, the message or logo itself represents you, for example, or at least you're the one who did it, right? And it's publicly displayed. So there are different motivation, different types, different intentions to arguably the same vandalism, deviant leisure. So we have to be able to think about different possible reasons to address it. Now, the chapter asks this question about, is graffiti an outdoor, is this graffiti or outdoor pop culture, art? And there's this art picture. It's obviously art, actually. And talk about it. Ask this question. And graffiti, to me, is one of the favorite kind of vandalism. It's a weird thing to say, because really, it's everywhere. It shows that deviant leisure taboo recreation could be everywhere in our life, in our city too. It really challenges the notion between what is deviant and what is not, potentially. So let's take a look at it. For example, this one, some of them are personal picture. It's Edmonton, 2017, right on the White Avenue. Right now, there's it's very close to Filipino ice cream shop, which I love, by the way. Great ice cream. There was actually, that doesn't exist anymore, but there's this hand graffiti. It's so artistic, at least to me. And apparently to these youth and kids, and this is my picture, I'm taking a picture of the graffiti, but also kids who are taking a picture with the graffiti. So to them, at least, it has some artistic value to it, appeal to it. And obviously, this graffiti wasn't really organic graffiti, if I would call, like the random people did it without a permission. It's one of those things planned and they're done it as part of society. City of Edmonton uses graffiti, some of the graffiti intentionally. Some streets and neighborhood and community use graffiti to add certain artistic pop characteristics and atmosphere to the area. So there's that benefit too. Another example, an arguably more organic one, is Montreal. And I was there 2017 for a conference. I love the city. I mean, the French part of it, the festival, so many festivals over summer, comedy, music. It's a really fun place to be, I found. But another characteristic of Montreal is that it's filled with the graffiti, and so many of them, and some of them look more organic, or maybe allowed, permitted by the people who own this building, but it's not necessarily part of the community per se, because there are so many different themes, like pop to more jazzy one to religious, or arguably more religious, ethnic things. Very, very interesting. More organic and random. When I was in Vienna, Austria, Europe, Eastern Europe, for conference, 2016 summer. Gosh, long time ago. I love the city, by the way. It's so many culture, fun people, great memory. And there's this canal, like a man-made river, comes right into downtown Vienna. And it's filled with graffiti. And you can see, for example, on the right side of the picture, right? The kind of like a classic European style architecture that's juxtaposed right below it is a whole bunch of mosaic of graffiti. Of course, it's not planned. It's happening organic. When I was going back and forth here, to go to conference convention center, I've seen many people who are painting over, existing graffiti with the new graffiti of their own, and really high level. Some of them are really, really high level that I can, from my perspective at least. And the entire canal looks like this. There's you can see so many graffiti, and they change over, during day and day over days and weeks, it changes. And by the way, this canal was also evening time. It's lit up, and there's a music, and there's a man-made beach, actually artificial beach, and there's a drink place actually where you can pick up alcohol and things like that, and people actually hang out. This outdoor, you can drink outside in most of the European cities. So people actually have leisure. But the background of it, interesting part is the background of it is this deep, quote unquote, deviant leisure, the graffiti. And then finally, in terms of graffiti, we have to talk about Banksy, whom I have referred to, I have mentioned a couple of times in this course already. Probably Banksy is the arguably most famous graffiti artist in the world. And Banksy's work often refers to our global issues, very, poverty, war, conflicts, capitalism, political issues, so many things. And that's why, Banksy's work is sometimes worth a lot of money. We, as a society, consider this is art, right? And it's a graffiti. Sometimes it's a random wall. And Banksy just put their work on it. That's their canvas, if you will. So this is definitely art. So really, where's the line between, it's not just the person who is doing their graffiti, it feels this is leisurely, but we consider it's part of arts, art being related to leisure. So really, is it dichotomy between leisure, recreation versus graffiti, or vandalism and the taboo deviance, or there's a lot of overlap between them? And I think this Banks's example shows that there's a lot of overlap between them. They're not either or. That's the end of the second video, and I will see you in the next video.